Hi, good morning. Welcome to our last session of Law 101 Final Exam Revision. Okay, and what have we done so far? Okay, let's go through what we have done so far. Okay, yesterday we started off the session by looking at law of contract, and we looked at free consent. And where free consent is concerned, I told you all, okay, there will be one problem question and there will be one essay question. Okay, so and then once we finish this, okay, we also did the second area for contract, okay, where we did discharge of contract. Where discharge of contract is concerned, I told you yesterday, there will be one problem question in the exam. Then we did agency. Where agency is concerned, okay, I told you all that there will be one problem question in the exam and there will be one essay question. Okay, then yesterday afternoon, we looked at Sale of Goods Act 1957, and I told you all there will be one problem question in this area. Okay, so this is what we did yesterday, and today we'll look at the last three important areas for your final exam. Okay, we'll start off by looking at hire purchase. Now, where hire purchase is concerned, there will be one essay question in the exam. Where hire purchase is concerned, there will be one essay question in the exam. Okay, so just take note of it. Okay, now what is hire purchase? What is hire purchase? Okay, let me briefly explain to you what is hire purchase. Okay, now in a hire purchase transaction, what happens over here is the seller may sell something to the buyer, but the buyer doesn't have enough money to pay for whatever he's buying. Okay, so the buyer may buy something from the seller, but the buyer may not have enough money to pay for whatever he's purchasing. So the buyer will borrow money from somebody. The buyer will borrow money from somebody. Okay, this somebody here could be the bank. This somebody here could be the bank. So the bank is the one who pays the seller for whatever the buyer is buying. The bank is the one who is paying whatever the buyer is buying. Since the bank paid for whatever the buyer is buying, okay, the bank will become the owner of the goods which the buyer bought. And where the buyer is concerned, the buyer is the hirer. Okay, and the seller over here could be the dealer. Now, on a monthly basis, the buyer is supposed to make monthly payments. The buyer is supposed to make monthly payments, okay, to the bank for the money they have borrowed. Okay, for the money they have borrowed. Okay. Now, the law that governs hire purchase is called the Hire Purchase Act 1967. And you can buy all of those following goods on hire purchase. You can buy all of these goods on hire purchase, and these goods are listed in the first schedule of the Hire Purchase Act. Number one, all consumer goods. So for example, now we can buy a laptop, a washing machine, a fridge, okay, an aircon. You can buy all of these on hire purchase, but normally nobody buys that. Nobody buys that. All right, people buy those kind of consumer goods on by cash payment. Okay. Now the second goods you can buy on hire purchase is motor vehicles. Now in Malaysia, a lot of people buy motor vehicles on hire purchase because motor vehicles, they are quite expensive. All right. So if you're talking about invalid carriages are carriers. are carriers. You know, like sometimes there are things which are attached to a car to carry things. We call it invalid carriages. Motorcycles, okay, even cars. Now, cars are the most common one. A lot of people buy cars in Malaysia through hire purchase. Okay, even lorries, trucks. Okay, provided it is less than 2.54 kilograms, and of course buses, including stage buses. Having said that, the most common things people buy in hire purchase is a car. Now, hire purchase basically means that you are buying something, okay, and you're buying something and you're paying for whatever you're buying by installment. Okay, hire purchase basically means you buy something and for whatever you bought, you are paying it by installment. Okay. Now, if you want to enter into a hire purchase transaction, there are 3 stages involved. What happens before you enter into hire purchase contract? What happens during the hire purchase contract? And what happens after the hire purchase contract? Now, before you enter into a hire purchase contract, okay, the person who is going to lend you the money, the owner here means the bank. The bank is required to fill up a form, okay, which can be found in part 1 of the second schedule, okay, of the Hire Purchase Act. So if you have the Hire Purchase Act with you, you go somewhere behind, there is a form there. That form must be completed and given to the potential hirer. Now, the reason why this form needs to be completed is because we want the hirer to get a better understanding of what he is getting himself into. In that form, which we prepared by the bank for the hirer, the following information will be inside. Okay, a brief description of the goods which the hirer wants to buy, his financial obligations, and some information about payments. Okay. Now, this form, okay, it must be completed and also it must be signed by the hirer. At the same time also, okay, there is another form, okay, which the bank needs to sign. Okay, and this form is in part 2 of the second schedule, which states that the owner is willing to become the owner of the goods. Alright? The bank is willing to become the owner of the goods. So this is the second form which must be completed, okay, before you enter into hire purchase contract. Okay? Now, once you enter into a hire purchase contract, please take note, all hire purchase transactions, once you enter into hire purchase contract, please take note, the contract must be in writing. The hire purchase contract must be in writing. If it is not in writing, it is void. And this contract must be signed by both parties. Who are the both parties? Okay, the bank, who is the owner, and the borrower. And who's the borrower? The borrower is the hirer, the person who's borrowing the money. The contract must be signed by these 2 people. And in the contract, the following information must be there. Okay, in the contract, the following information must be there. The date when the hiring begins, sufficient information about the goods, enough to identify the goods, number of installments to be paid by the hirer. Okay, now if you are buying more than 1 goods on hire purchase, then you need to have a separate contract for each of the goods. The amount of installment, the address where the goods are placed, and the date when the installment is to be paid. Alright? All of this must be in the hire purchase contract. Now, after you enter into a hire purchase contract, within 14 days, a copy of the contract must be given to the hirer by the owner. That means the bank must give the hirer, okay, a copy of the contract within 14 days after the contract is signed. If the bank does not do so, the agreement is actually void. Okay? Okay, now here are some rights and liabilities of the hirer. Okay? Now they are stated in section 9, 10, 11, 12, 14, and 15. Alright? The rights of the hirer, they are stated in section 9 to 15. So let's look at it one by one. Let's look at it one by one. Now the first one is section 9. Section 9 talks about the hirer's right to obtain information. Please take note, okay, sometimes, okay, the hirer, he may borrow money from the bank to buy something, okay, and after he has paid the loan for a few years, he may want to know what is the status of his payment. He wants to know more information about how much he has paid and how much is still due. So what he can do is he can make a written request to the bank, asking the bank to give more information about the money which he has borrowed. And once the bank has received a written request from the borrower, the bank must respond within 14 days. And when the bank responds, the bank must give the following information: the amount paid by the owner, the amount paid to the owner by the hirer, the total amount which has become due under the agreement which remains unpaid, the amount which has become payable under the agreement, and how much interest out of the installment payment. Okay? So all of this information must be given by the bank to the hirer. Okay? Now please take note, if the bank has given such information to the hirer in the last 3 months, okay, if in the last 3 months the bank has given this information to the hirer, then the bank doesn't need to give this information within 14 days. Now, if the bank fails to give this information to the hirer within 14 days, then the hire purchase contract will become unenforceable. Okay? Then the hire purchase contract will become unenforceable. Alright? That means, so it becomes unenforceable. Which means that the hire purchase contract is temporarily suspended. It is temporarily suspended. Okay? But once the bank gives all the relevant information, then everything is back to normal. Now, please take note, if the bank doesn't give this information within 1 month, if the bank doesn't give this information within 1 month, then the bank can be fined up to 1,000 ringgit, which is not much for the bank. Okay? Now, next, appropriation of payment. Appropriation of payment here means, you see, what if, for example, now, okay, the hirer, okay, bought a washing machine. The hirer bought a washing machine, and the monthly installment is maybe 200 ringgit. And he bought maybe an aircon, okay, and the monthly installment is maybe 300 ringgit, hypothetically speaking, okay. Now every month, okay, the hirer needs to pay 500 ringgit. He needs to pay 500 ringgit to the owner. But what if in a particular month he doesn't have 500? He only has 300 ringgit. What if in a particular month he doesn't have 500 ringgit to pay the total installment? He only has 300 ringgit. In this situation, he can request the bank, the owner, to have the lesser amount divided between these two. Alright? Purchase, and if in a particular month he doesn't have enough money to pay the full installment, he can pay a lesser amount, and he can ask the owner to have the lesser amount divided between the goods he has bought on hire purchase. Okay, this is what I mean by appropriation of payment. Next, change of location. The goods must be placed. The goods must be placed where it is stated in a hire purchase contract. The goods must be placed where it is stated in a hire purchase contract. If you want to move the goods to a new location, okay, you must get the approval of a magistrate. Magistrate is actually the court. You must get the court's approval. But in reality, nobody does that. This is only in theory. It's only in theory. In reality, nobody does that. Okay? Okay, next, transfer of title. What is transfer of title? Now, transfer of title, okay, in a layman's term, means refinancing. Okay? Transfer of title in a layman's term means refinancing. Okay, now what if, for example, now you bought a car, okay, and you took a loan from AB Bank. You bought a car and you took a loan from AB Bank. Okay, you took a fire loan. Now, after you have paid the loan for 1 year, you have realized that you don't like AB Bank. And now you want to change the bank to a different bank. Maybe now you want to take a loan from XY Bank. So what can you do? In this situation, you can apply for a loan from XY Bank and ask the XY Bank to settle the loan with AB Bank. And once XY Bank settles the loan with AB Bank, now XY Bank will become the owner of the goods. And now you have to pay monthly installment to XY Bank. Alright, so this is called refinancing. That means you are changing the owner. You are changing the owner. That means you are changing the bank from whom you have borrowed money. Alright? Okay? Next, early termination. Okay, so are you okay with transfer title? Can Okay, next, early termination. Can you settle the loan early? Can you settle the loan early? So for example now, what if you bought a car and you took a fire loan from a particular bank for the loan? After you have paid the loan for 3 years, suddenly you have a lot of money. Can you settle the loan fast? The answer is yes. So early termination here means you make a full settlement. You make a full settlement of the loan early. Alright, you make a full settlement of the loan early. That's called early settlement. That's called early termination. Okay? The last one over here is termination of a hire purchase agreement. Now sometimes what happens is, okay, you may have bought a car, for example, and you took a loan from the bank. You took a fire loan. After you paid the loan for 3 years, you're just fed up. You're just fed up and you want to end the hire purchase agreement. Can you do that? Now, if you want to end the hire purchase agreement, okay, there are 2 ways how you can do it. Number one, you can sell off the goods. You can sell off the goods to anyone. And once you sell off the goods to anyone, the money you get from selling off the goods, you can settle the loan. And when you settle the loan, if there's any extra money, okay, you can get it. But after you settle the loan, if there is any shortage of money, you have to pay from your pocket. Okay? Alternatively, you can return the goods to the bank. You can go to the bank and say that I don't want the goods anymore, you can take it. So if you return the goods to the bank will auction off the goods. The bank will auction off the goods. When the goods are auctioned off, again, after the goods have been auctioned off, the money they get from the auction will settle the loan. And of course, if there's any extra money, you can get it. But after the loan is settled, if there's still some shortage of money, you have to pay from your pocket. So this is what you mean by termination of the hire purchase agreement. Are you okay with this? With this, we have completed, okay, hire purchase. Are there any questions? Is there anything we should clarify? Alright, is there anything we should clarify? Okay, if there's nothing to clarify, okay, let's look at some tutorial questions from this area. Okay, there are 5 examples of questions which can give you an exam. So I'll give you about 5 minutes to read through the questions. And once you have read the questions, we'll do it together in 5 minutes. Alright, so please read through the questions. Okay, if you're ready, shall we start? Now let's look at the first question over here. Explain what needs to be done before a hire purchase contract is entered into. Now, before you enter into a hire purchase contract, there are 2 forms which must be completed by the person who's going to lend you money. And these forms are actually, you can find this form in part 1 and part 2 of the second schedule of the Hire Purchase Act. Alright? Now, the purpose of these forms are, number 1, to give more information to the hirer about the loan he's taking. And also, it's actually a form whereby the bank is saying that it's willing to become the owner of the goods. Alright, so just take note of it. So this is a simple answer. So the owner prepares a written statement in accordance to the form which can be found in part 1 of the second schedule of the Hire Purchase Act. Alright, to the prospective hirer. Okay, and in that form, okay, the following information will be there. Okay, a brief description of the goods, the financial obligations, and information of payments. At the same time also, okay, the bank, okay, must complete a second form which is in part 2 of the second schedule of the Hire Purchase Act, stating that it's willing to become the owner of the goods. Okay, just for information. Just be 1 second, I'll just make the answer a bit more precise so you can understand. Alright, this just to so they can able to understand better lah. All right, the owner is the lender, i.e. the bank. The hirer is a borrower, the person who is borrowing the money. And the part 1 and part 2, okay, of these forms, you can be found in the Hire Purchase Act 1967. It's over there. All right. Okay, now let's look at the second question. What should be included in a hire purchase contract? What should be included in a hire purchase contract? Now, in relation to this, you can refer to Section 4C, the Hire Purchase Act 1967, which says that there are 6 things which you must include in a hire purchase contract. Number 1, the date when the hiring starts. Number 2, sufficient information of the goods, enough to identify the goods. Number 3, the number of installments to be paid by the hirer. Number 4, okay, separate agreements if you're buying more than one goods on hire purchase. Number 5, amount of installment. Number 6, address where the goods are to be placed. And the last one, okay, the date when the installments will be paid. All of this information must be there. Okay? Okay? Okay, if you're done with this, okay, we can look at the next question. Okay, now, what happens after the hire purchase contract is entered into? What happens after a hire purchase contract is entered into? Please take note, after a hire purchase contract is entered into, within 14 days, a copy of the contract must be given to the hirer and also the guarantor, if there is any. Alright, and if this is not done, then a hire purchase contract becomes unenforceable, which means that it will be temporarily suspended. Okay? Next question. Explain what are the rights of the hirer, okay, or hirer for information about the hire or his hire purchase under the Hire Purchase Act. What it basically means is that, okay, now what if, for example, now, okay, you borrowed money from the bank, all right, to buy something, and after you pay the installment for a while, you want to know how much have you paid, you want to know the status of your payment. What can you do? All right. Over here, you can contact the bank and ask the bank to provide you with more information. And this is stated in Section 9. This is stated in Section 9, which says that, okay, what they call that, when the hirer is concerned, okay, he can always request the bank, okay, for more information about the status of his payment. And this request must be made in writing. And once the hirer makes his request, the bank must respond within 14 days. And once the bank responds, it must give you the following information. Okay, just for information. Ken? Okay, if you're done with this, let's look at the last question over here. The last question over here talks about, discuss how can a hirer end the hire purchase contract? How can the hirer end the hire purchase contract? Now, if you end the hire purchase contract, this is stated in Section 15. There are 2 ways how this can be done. Number 1, the hirer can sell off the goods to anyone he wants. And once he sells off the goods, the money he gets from selling off the goods, he can settle the loan. And once he settles the loan, if there's any extra money, he's entitled for it. But after the loan is settled, there's still shortage of money, then he has to pay from his pocket. Okay? The second option is he can return the goods to the bank. Alright? And once the goods are returned back, the goods will be auctioned off. And once the goods have been auctioned off, Alright, the money you get from the auction will be used to settle the loan. Alright, and once the loan has been settled, okay, if there's any extra money, the hirer is entitled for it. If there's a shortage of money, okay, then the hirer has to pay from his pocket. Okay? So, but this is just some brief information of what you can add on inside now. Because this question only carries 10 marks. A half-page answer should be fine. Okay, this is just some information which you can put inside if you want to. Okay? Okay, with this, we have finished with the first part over here. Alright, now let's look at the next chapter over here, which is actually on company law. Okay, on company law over here. Okay, before we look at company law, let's take a short 10 minutes break. And once you're back, we'll continue with it. So let's take a short 10 minutes break. Alright, thank you. Okay, hi. Shall we continue? Okay, now the next area we're looking at is actually company law. Okay, and there will be one essay question. Okay, one essay question in the exam in this area. One essay question. Okay, so just take note of it. Now, where company law is concerned, I don't expect you all to know this area in too detail. Just some brief information will be fine. Okay. Now, the first issue I want you all to know over here is, now if you want to start a business, there are a few options available to you. Now, the first way how you can start a business is as a sole trader. Sole trader here means you want to start the business alone. You'll be the only owner of the business. There's only one owner. Now, the second option is you can start a business through a partnership. In a partnership, you can have between 2 to 20 partners. And the last one over here is you can always start up a business through a limited company. Okay, just for information. Now, if you want to start up your business as a sole trader, then there's only one owner in this business. There's only one owner. Alright? Now, this is the simplest economic and legal unit. This is the easiest way to start a business. In any given country, most businesses are conducted this way. Alright? Like, the people on the roadside, they're selling some food, or some drinks. Okay, all of these people are sole traders. Now, if you want, you can do the business on your own, or you can hire people to help you out. Now, the only problem with a sole trader is that the sole trader's liability is unlimited, which means that the sole trader can be personally liable for the business debts. Which means that if the creditors of the business are unable to recover, the loan, the money from the business, they can sue the sole trader personally. Okay, so that's why I mentioned over here. This point is mentioned over here. Okay, and of course, there's no separation between the business and personal asset. Okay, it's always considered to be one. Another problem over here is that there is no perpetual succession. No perpetual succession here means there is no continuity. There's no continuity. What does that mean? It means that if the sole trader wants to retire, if the sole trader dies, then the entire business will close down. So in other words, the business is very much dependent on the sole trader. If the sole trader dies, or if he wants to retire, the whole business will close down. Okay? So here are some advantages of a sole trader. Number one, very few formalities involved in the creation of a sole trader. That means very easy to start. Very easy to start. Okay? And very cheap to manage and very cheap to form. To run the business on a yearly basis, very cheap. Okay, you have total control over the entire business. You can keep all the profit. Disadvantages, this kind of business will always remain small. And the sole trader's liability is unlimited. And of course, there is no perpetual succession. There's no perpetual succession. So these are all examples of disadvantages. Next, partnership. Now, where partnership is concerned, you can have between 2 to 20 partners. Okay, and in a partnership, a partner can either be a real person or even a company. Even a company can be a partner. Alright? And to form a partnership, what you need is a simple contract between partners. And this contract can either be made orally or in writing. and you need to register the business with the registrar of business. That's about it. Okay? Now, what are the advantages of this kind of business? Number one, very few formalities involved, okay, in terms of formation and registration. That means very easy to form. And also very few formalities in terms of management. That means to run the business on a yearly basis also very easy. Okay, cheap to form, cheap to manage. Alright, it's very cheap to form the business, and it's very cheap to run the business on a year-to-year basis. Okay, you have more capital, and you are subjected to lesser loss. Problems? This kind of business will remain smaller compared to a limited company. Now, the partner's liability is unlimited, which means that the partners can be held personally liable for the business debts. Okay? And of course, there is no perpetual succession, which means there is no continuity. That means if a partner dies or if a partner wants to resign, the entire business you have to close down. And if partners don't get along, you may have to close down the entire business. And of course, difficult to raise funds. Which means that once you have already reached the maximum number of partners, okay, and if you want to grow bigger, you may have to borrow money from somebody. Okay, that's for information. Okay. Okay, now the next kind of business you can start over here is through a company. This is the next kind of business you can start. Now please take note, there are two types of companies. Alright, over here we're talking about companies which are limited by shares. There are two types. The first one over here is called a private limited company. In a private limited company, you can have between 1 to 50 shareholders. And the second one over here is called a public limited company. In a public limited company, you can have between 2 to an unlimited number of shareholders. And the shares over here can be sold to the public through the stock exchange. Okay? Alright. Now, what are the advantages of a company? Number one, there is perpetual succession, which means there is continuity. Which means that the existence of the company is not dependent on who the shareholder is. Shareholders can change, shareholders can die, but the company will continue. Alright? So in a company, there is perpetual succession, which means there is continuity, which means that the existence of the company is not dependent on who the shareholder is. Shareholders can change, shareholders can die, but the company will continue. Next, the company can enter into contracts under its own name. Next, the company has more capital because more shareholders. Okay, the shareholders' liability is limited, which means that the maximum the shareholders will lose in the event the company closes down is the amount of money they've invested in the company. Alright, which means that the shareholders not liable for the business debts. And separate legal entity here means the company will be responsible for whatever it does, and not the shareholders, okay, and not the employees. Next, what's the problem with this kind of business? Number one, there are too many formalities involved in terms of formation and creation. There are a lot of things you need to do, a lot of forms you need to fill up, a lot of procedures you must follow. Even on a year-to-year basis, a lot of things you're expected to do. And you are subjected to a lot of laws. And also, it's very expensive to form and very expensive to manage. Okay? Okay, next. Please take note, section 21, subsection 1 says, section 21, subsection 1, Companies Act. This is the Companies Act. Let me just correct this here. Okay, now section 21, subsection 1, Companies Act 2016 says that once a company has been created, okay, the company can perform all functions like a company, and it has full capacity to carry on any activity they want. And as such, the company can sue people under its own name. The company can be sued under its own name. The company can buy, hold, and sell property under its own name. Acquire means the company can buy property under its own name. Hold and own is the same thing. They can develop the property. They can also dispose means they can even sell the property. Okay? And the company can enter into any transactions. The company can enter into any transactions. Transactions here means contracts. The company can enter into any contracts. Okay? Okay, next. Separate legal entity, I've already explained to you this now, which means that the company will be responsible for whatever it does. The company will be responsible for whatever it does. Alright? And this is stated in section 20. This is section 20. Alright? And because the company is a separate legal entity, okay, the company and the shareholders are separate. There is a corporate will. There is a corporate will that hides the shareholders. Will means curtain, like this, a curtain that hides the shareholders. But there's no real curtain in the real sense of the word line. It's just a metaphor. What it basically means is that the identity of the shareholders is always hidden. We do not know who the shareholders are. So as far as outsiders are concerned, outsiders, they deal with the company. Alright? You don't deal with the shareholders. Alright? And because of this corporate will, okay, the company will be responsible for whatever it does. Okay, the company will be responsible for whatever it does. So whatever the company does, the company will be responsible for it. And as such, the company will be responsible for their own debts. Okay? The shareholders' liability. Shareholders' liability is limited. the shareholders' liability is limited to the amount they have invested in the company. Okay? The company can buy, sell property under its own name. The company can enter into contracts under its own name. A company can commit a crime. A company can be a victim of a crime. A company has perpetual succession, which means it has continuity. And a company can borrow money. A company can borrow money. Okay? So this is the effect of corporate will. Okay? Okay, now the last thing I want you to know over here is that in certain situations, the corporate will may be lifted either by Companies Act or by common law. If the corporate will is lifted, it means that the company will no longer be held responsible for what it has done. Instead, somebody else will be held responsible. For example, the directors, shareholders, and promoters. Now, the corporate will can be lifted in situations where there is fraud or cheating. Okay, the corporate will can be lifted if there's any element of fraud or cheating. If there's any element of fraud or cheating, then a company will not be responsible for that action. Instead, somebody else will be held responsible. Maybe the directors, maybe the shareholders, maybe the employees. Okay? Okay, with this, we are finished with company law. Are there any questions? Is there anything we should clarify? No questions? Okay, let's look at some tutorial questions. Alright, I'll give you 5 minutes to read through the questions. Please read through. Okay, if you're ready, shall we start? Alright, now, the first question over here. What is meant by separate legal entity? What is meant by separate legal entity? So like what I explained to you just now, separate legal entity means the company and the shareholders, they are separate. Okay? The company is a separate legal entity. And this was decided in the case of Solomon and Solomon. What it basically means is that, okay, the company will be responsible for whatever it does. Okay? The company will be responsible for whatever it does, not the shareholders, not the directors. Okay? Do you understand this? Okay, if you're done with this, look at the next question. Now, what is the effect of corporate will under Companies Act, company law? So what happens, what is the effect of a corporate will? Now, the effect of the corporate will is as follows. Now, in the exam, you'll need to explain each one of this now. Alright, I've written this in a bullet point, but in the exam, you need to explain this. For example, now, the first point says, the company will be responsible for their own debts. Okay? The second point says that the shareholders' liability is limited to the amount they have invested in the company. Which means that the maximum a shareholder will lose in the event the company closes down is the amount of money they have invested. Company's property means a company can buy, hold, and sell property under its own name. Contractual capacity means a company can enter into a contract under its own name. Okay, crimes here means a company can commit a crime. A company can commit a crime or be a victim of a crime. Okay? Perpetual succession, I already mentioned here before, it means there is continuity. Which means that the existence of the company, there is continuity. Which means that the existence of the company is not dependent on who the shareholder is. Shareholders can change, shareholders can die, but the company will continue. And perpetual succession here means the company can borrow money. The company can borrow money. Alright, so if you're given a question like this, you need to explain each one of this. Alright, if you want to score maximum marks. Okay? Okay, shall we continue? Okay, look at the next question. Now, what happens if the corporate will is lifted? What happens if the corporate will is lifted? Now, if the corporate will is lifted, it means that the company will no longer be held responsible for what it has done. Instead, someone else could be held responsible. Okay, it could be the directors, the shareholders, or the employees. And the corporate will can be lifted if there's any element of fraud or cheating in a transaction involving a company. Okay, easy as that. Okay, if you're done with this, look at the next question. What are the advantages of forming a business through partnership? A very simple question. What are the advantages of forming a business through partnership? Now, advantages are as follows. Number one, okay, there are very few formalities involved in the formation and registration of the business. Number one. Number two, there are very few formalities involved in terms of running the business. It is very cheap to form this kind of business, and also it is very cheap to manage this kind of business on a year-to-year basis. And you have more capital because you have more shareholders, so more partners, you have more partners. And last but not least, you are subjected to lesser loss. You are subjected to lesser loss. All right? So just a simple answer like this will do. Okay? Are there any questions? Okay, we're done with this. Let's look at the last question from this area. What are the disadvantages of forming a business through a company? A very easy question. What are the disadvantages of forming a business through a company? Now, the disadvantages are as follows. Number one, there are too many formalities involved in the formation and management of the company. There are a lot of things you need to do. It's very complex, a lot of procedures you're expected to follow. And also, you are subjected to a lot of laws. To run the company on a year-to-year basis, there are a lot of laws you need to follow. And also, it is very expensive to form and very expensive to manage on a year-to-year basis. Okay? A simple answer like this will do. Are there any questions? Okay, no questions. You already finished with this area. Now let's look at the last important area for your final exam. The last important area. Okay? Okay, now the last important area for a final exam is copyright. And where copyright is concerned, okay, there will be an essay question in the exam. Essay question. Alright? Now, please take note. I think you just ignore this. This time you don't need to know this. This also don't need to know. You can just cut short to the thing over here. Alright, now the first thing you need to know over here is the law that governs copyright is called the Copyright Act 1987. Okay? Now, where copyright is concerned, okay, in order to have a better understanding of copyright, okay, example of a copyright would be, now, if you do a painting, the moment you do a painting, you will have a copyright over the painting. You take a photo, you take a photograph. The moment you take a photograph, you have a copyright over that photograph. Okay? The moment you write an essay, for example, you do an assignment. Alright, the moment you do an assignment, you have a copyright over your assignment. Alright? Now, copyright doesn't require registration. You don't need to register to with any particular body. The moment you create something, you are automatically entitled for copyright. Okay, the thing belongs to you. That thing belongs to you. Okay? And nobody is allowed to copy your work. Now, please take note, okay, that according to Section 6, Copyright Act, only those areas which are stated in the Copyright Act is entitled for copyright protection. And here are some basic principles of copyright. Okay, and these are the principles, and we'll look at it one by one. Number one, originality. Now, what do you mean by originality? Now, originality does not mean that your work must be novel or something new. Alright? As long as you create the work yourself, it's good enough. You must prove that the work originated from you and you use some skills and judgment to create that work. And you did not copy from another person. Right? So for you to be entitled for copyright, okay, your work doesn't need to be something which is out of this planet. Alright? The moment you create something and you put in some effort, you are entitled for copyright. So for example, now you do a painting. No matter how horrible your painting is, you are still entitled for copyright protection. Okay? So that's why I mentioned over here, okay, a work shall be protected by copyright irrespective of the quality or the purpose of which it was created. So even if your work is garbage, you are still entitled for copyright protection. Okay? Now, rights in copyright, rights in material means there is a possibility that the actual work you can give to somebody else and the copyright you can give to somebody else. So for example, now I do a painting. I do the painting. After I do the painting I give to person A. And the copyright for the painting I give to person B. I can even do that if I want to. Okay? Now, the following things will not be entitled for copyright protection. There is no copyright protection for ideas. As long as your idea remains in your head, no copyright protection. If you want copyright protection, your work must be recorded, written, or otherwise reduced to some material form. As long as your idea remains in your head, no copyright protection. There is no copyright protection for procedures or method operation. Processes, procedures, no copyright protection. If you want any protection for procedures, processes, or method operation, go and register it as a patent. Okay? Even mathematical concepts, for example, formulas, mathematical formulas, no copyright protection. If you want copyright protection, your work must be done independently. You did not copy from another person. Next, now you see, the moment you create something, for example now, the moment you take a photo, or the moment you do a painting, you will automatically have two rights. One is called moral rights, and the other one is called copyright. Where copyright is concerned, copyright can be transferred. you can always give the copyright to another person. Number two, if you have copyright, you are entitled for economic rights. What is economic rights? You can charge people money for using your work. Alright? And also, you can sue anyone who tries to copy your work without your permission. Now, where moral rights are concerned, this is the second right you will have. Moral rights cannot be transferred. It will always, 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 always be with the creator, the author. Okay? Now, if you have moral rights but no copyright, you are not entitled for economic rights. What does that mean? So if you have if you have moral rights but you don't have copyright, you cannot charge people money for using your work. Okay? Now, if you have moral rights but no copyright, you cannot sue anyone who tries to copy your work. Then what's the advantage over here? The only advantage over here is no one is allowed to modify your work unless they get your permission. Even the copyright owner, if he wants to modify your work, he must get the permission of the person who has moral rights. Okay, just for information. Next, material form. If you want copyright protection, your work must be written down, recorded, or otherwise reduced to some material form. As long as your idea remains in your head, no copyright protection. Next, formalities. Okay, there are no formalities involved in copyright. Okay, you don't need to register your copyright. You don't even need to put the C symbol. You don't even need to do that. The moment you create something, you are automatically entitled for copyright. Then the issue here is, how can you prove that that work belongs to you? How can you prove? One way to prove is you can have an affidavit or a statutory declaration. Affidavit or statutory declaration is you go to a lawyer or commissioner of oath and you swear that the work belongs to you. That's one way. Even if you don't have that, there are other ways to prove that the work belongs to you. Okay? Next, for you to be entitled for copyright protection, you must have put in some effort. For you to be entitled for copyright protection, you must have put in some effort. So in other words, blindly cutting and pasting, if you just cut and paste, cut and paste, cut and paste, copy and paste, copy and paste, that doesn't involve any effort. And you're not entitled for any copyright protection. Okay? Now, if you want copyright protection, there is no copyright protection for news. News, for example, what if there was a volcano eruption in a particular place? Everybody is entitled to report that. Everybody is entitled to report that. Alright? But copyright protection can be given to the way how the news was expressed. Okay? Now, if you want copyright protection, you must have done sufficient work. You must have done sufficient work. One word or two words will not entitle you to any right one word or few words will not entitle you to any copyright protection. So for example now, taglines like just do it, finger licking good, okay, ultimate driving machine, all these taglines, you are not entitled for any copyright protection. If you want any protection for taglines, you have to register it as a trademark. Okay? Computer programming is more patent. Alright, where computer programming is concerned, if you want protection, go and register it as a patent. Next, artistic work. Artistic work. Now, if you take a 2D and you want to make a 3D out of it, you take a photo and you want to make a 3D model out of a photo, you must get the permission of the person who has the copyright. If you take a 3D and you want to make a 2D out of it, you must get the permission of the person who has the copyright over the 3D. Okay? Another thing you need to know over here is that If you do a painting of something, for example, now you do a painting of a building in Ho Chi Minh, all right? Now you have copyright over your painting, but not over the building you painted. All right. So if you do a painting of something, you have a copyright over the painting, but not what you have painted. Okay. Now artistic craftsmanship over here means like carvings, wood carvings, stone carvings. Now this is the only area under copyright where your work has to be creative. All right. So your work has to be both artistic and also it must be some form of craftsmanship involved. Next, how are you entitled for copyright protection? If you want copyright protection in Malaysia, you must fulfill either section 10.1 or 10.2. According to section 10 subsection 1, if you want copyright protection in Malaysia, you must be a citizen, or alternatively, you must have PR status in Malaysia. If you are body corporate, your company must be established in Malaysia. Alright? Now, if it is joint ownership, one party must fulfill the above requirement. Okay? When you say made here means refers to the author, the creator, and not the copyright owner. Okay? Next, qualifications. If you do not fulfill section 10 sub 1, if you do not fulfill section 10 sub 1, you are still entitled for copyright protection if you fulfill section 10 subsection 2, which says that if you're talking about literary, musical, artistic, film, or sound recording, okay, your work must be first published in Malaysia. What do you mean by first published? Either a copy or copies of a work must be made available in Malaysia. At least one copy must be made available in Malaysia. If your work was published in a different country within 30 days, it must be published in Malaysia. Okay? If your work was published in a country which is a member of Bern's Convention, then your work is automatically published in Malaysia. And please take note, nearly all countries are members of the Bern's Convention. Nearly all countries are members of the Bern's Convention. If you're talking about architecture work, the building must be erected in Malaysia. Broadcasting, your work must be broadcasted from Malaysia. Okay? Now, how long is the copyright protection? The copyright protection is for the lifetime of the author. And once the author dies, another 50 years. Most countries, they follow this minimum number. Most countries, they follow this minimum number. But EU, European Union, has extended the 50 years. I think EU is either 60 or 70 years. So there are some countries which are following EU, for example, Singapore. Okay? Now, if your work is published after the person died, if the work is published after the person died, then the time starts 1 year after the publication. If the author is unknown, we calculate from the date of the first publication. Okay? So in relation to copyright, it's the only thing you need to know. Okay? Okay, now here are examples of questions which I can give you in your exam. Alright, I'll give you about 5 minutes to read through the questions, try to understand, and we'll do it together in 5 minutes time, okay? Okay, if you're ready, shall we start? Okay, now let's look at the first question. With reference to Copyright Act require registration. Then how do you prove that you are the copyright owner? According to section 42, this can be proven by having an affidavit or statutory declaration. Okay, that means you go before a commissioner of oath or you go before a lawyer and you swear that you are the owner. Now, in the case of Rock Records and Audio One, in this case, it was stated that even if you don't have a affidavit, even if you don't have a statutory declaration, there are other ways to show that you are the creator. Okay? Okay? Okay, we're done with this. Look at the next question. Discuss what needs to be fulfilled in order for you to be eligible for copyright protection. If you want copyright protection, okay, what do you need to establish? Now, if you want copyright protection, you must fulfill either Section 10 sub 1 or Section 10 sub 2. Section 10 sub 1 says that you must be citizen of Malaysia, or alternatively, you must have PR status in Malaysia. If you do not fulfill Section 10 sub 1, you can still get copyright protection provided you fulfill Section 10 sub 2, which states that your work must be first published in Malaysia. That means at least one copy of your work must be made available in Malaysia. If your work is published in a different country, within 30 days, your work must be published in Malaysia. Then again, if your work is published in a country which is a member of the Burns Convention, then your work is published in Malaysia. And please take note, nearly all countries on this planet are members of the Burns Convention. Okay? Next question. Explain what is meant by moral rights under Copyright Act 1987. What do you mean by moral rights? What do you mean by moral rights? Okay. Now, as I mentioned to you just now, moral rights, please take note, economic rights is with the copyright owner. Alright, moral rights belongs to the author. An author is the first owner of the work. If an author is not the copyright owner, he cannot bring an action against anyone who tries to copy the work. Then what's the advantage of having moral rights? Advantage over here is the person who has moral rights, he can stop anyone from modifying the work. Anyone. He can stop anyone from modifying the work. Even the copyright owner. Okay? Next question. What is the duration for the copyright protection under the Copyright Act? Now, the duration for copyright protection is the lifetime of the author, and once the author dies, for another 50 years. Okay? If the work is published after the author's death, alright, then you start calculating 1 year after the date of publication. If the author is unknown, you calculate from the date of the first publication. Okay? Okay. And this is the last question. Discuss any four principles of copyright. Any four principles. Okay. Now I told you all earlier. Okay, there are about 2, 4, 6, 8. There are about 8. Wait, 2, 4, 6, 7. There are 7 principles over here. Over here, what you can do is, all right, you can choose any four. Okay, and explain in about half a page. Okay? You understand this? Alright, so you can choose any four and explain in about half a page. Alright? Alright, with this, we have finished with the area on. Alright, yeah. Let's conclude, okay, our revision. Okay, remember in the exam you'll have 2 sections, section A and section B. Section A, there will be essay questions. You need to answer. You can answer any 4. So you will have 1 question from agency, which is creation of agency, and copyright, trademark. Sorry, there'll be 5 questions. You can choose any 4. There will be 1 question for law of agency, i.e., creation of agency. Number 2, company law. Number 3, law of contract, focus on free consent. Then hire purchase, and the last one, copyright. So remember 5 questions: creation of agent, company law, free consent, hire purchase, and copyright. And under section B, there will be what do you call that? 4 problem questions. We answer all 4. Focus on Sale of Goods Act, focus on implied terms. Law of contract, focus on discharge of contract. Discharge of contract here means focus on either frustration or breach of contract. Okay? So over here, I want you to focus on either frustration or breach of contract. There will be a question on law of agency, again, creation of agency. And the last one over here is contract, focus on free consent. Part A over here, okay, you need to answer 4 questions, any 4. Each question carries 10 marks. This is how you get 40% marks. Part B, okay, there are 4 questions. Answer all 4, each question 15 marks. This is how you get 60. Total is 100 marks. Okay? And you must pass your final exam in order to pass overall. You need to pass the final exam in order to pass overall. Okay? Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Is there anything we should clarify? Alright, if there's something to clarify, thank you so much for coming, and good luck in the exam.